In the United States of America, something unimaginable is happening right now against the backdrop of preparations for the congressional elections. Donald Trump is essentially rewriting election laws and redrawing the electoral districts in such a way that the states which traditionally voted for Democrats will now be electing Republicans. Such redrawing of the electoral map will ultimately lead to a Republican victory, even if a greater number of votes are cast for the Democrats. And the whole paradox is that Trump is essentially not breaking any law or the Constitution, because there is a loophole in both. There is a certain phenomenon in the American political system. A party can get the majority of votes from voters in a state, but still end up losing the election for the legislature. This is the result of gerrymandering, which is the process of manipulating the boundaries of electoral districts. And by May 2026, this process in America reached its peak, as states were finishing redrawing maps ahead of the congressional midterm elections. And in this episode, I'll explain in simple terms how Republicans use control over the states to secure victories for supporters of Donald Trump. I'll explain what this means. This is redrawing district boundaries. Why does it affect elections and why? In a certain state, the Democratic Party may receive the majority of votes, but in the end, that state will be represented by more Republicans in the House of Representatives. In general, at first glance, it sounds confusing and complicated, but actually it's simple. Now we'll break everything down step by step. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to the channel. Like this episode and leave any comment under the video. I would really appreciate it. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, let's first go over the key events of the past few days which we'll be relying on. First, the facts, then the analysis, so don't be alarmed right away. The first is the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States from April 29, 2026 in the case of Louisiana versus Calais. The court was considering whether the district map of Louisiana is discriminatory towards the black population. As a result, on April 29, the court upheld the map created by the Republican majority. This decision established the doctrine that political gerrymandering, meaning the protection of a party's interest, is permissible even when its effects are indirect. As a result of this court decision in Louisiana, out of 6 districts, only 1 is guaranteed to remain with the Democrats, even though they, the Democrats, make up 30% of the electorate in this state. Technically, this means that it doesn't really matter how many Democrats there are in the state, because the map is drawn in such a way that the Republicans will win anyway. That's just from a technical standpoint. So how does all this work? There are 2 methods that can be used to manipulate electoral maps, and all of this relates to gerrymandering. On one hand, there's cracking, and on the other hand, there's packing. And now I'll explain what all of this means. To help you understand this complicated process, I'll give some simple examples, and it should be more or less clear. Imagine that you're participating in a race, in a marathon. You're running faster than everyone else, and your supporters are the loudest, cheering from the stands. You have the most support, you're clearly pulling ahead, but in the end the judge says someone else won. You're like, why? Well, because before the start, this judge just moved the finish line personally for your opponent. That is, he made winning more likely for him. The rules of the game suddenly changed, but you didn't know that yet. So you thought it was a regular race, you had support, you were the best, and you won. That's you. Again, it sounds absurd, but I'll explain why. Now I'll explain how it works in the United States of America using these districts as an example. Let's say you have a state where 60% vote Republican and 40% vote Democratic. You understand that overall in the state it's 60-40. And we need to divide all the voters, all of these voters, into 5 districts. What's the first way we can do this? In each district, the proportions are preserved, so that 60-40 split is the same in every district. As a result, we get 3 red seats, meaning 3 seats in the House of Representatives for the Republicans, and 2 for the blues, meaning the Democrats. Everything is basically fair. And here you already need to campaign, to persuade voters so that this dynamic changes. For example, then there could be 2 for the Republicans and 3 for the Democrats. But there's also a second option. This is gerrymandering by packing. How do you do that? And this is where the magic begins. This is what Donald Trump is doing right now. So, we take all the blue voters and pack them into one district. There, they win with 99% of the vote. You get a district where it's not 40% blue, but almost 100%. Great news, right? Well, actually, no. Because in the remaining 4 districts, Republicans make up a slightly larger share. And they take all 4 seats with 55%. That is just a little more than half, but still, they win. In America, there is a practice where each state elects a certain number of their representatives to the House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress. And as a rule, this number is equal to the number of voters. Each district decides whom it nominates as its representative to the U.S. Congress. As a result, where there were 3 districts for the Reds and 2 districts for the Blues, now the Blues have 40% support. Basically, at the state level, it stays the same. But now they have only 1 seat in Congress out of a possible 5. Voila, it turns out to be 4-1 victory for the Reds, even though before it was 3-2. Another scheme is the opposite, blurring boundaries known as cracking. We take the same state, the same 5 districts, the same 60-40 vote distribution. And so we take the area where the Blues live, meaning the supporters of the Democrats, and split that district into 4 parts. We attach each part to a huge rural area where the Reds live, meaning the supporters of the Republicans. As a result, the Blues are surrounded everywhere. It turns out that instead of 5 districts, we now have 4, and they are in the minority. And now they have 0 seats. So, the Democrats in this state, yes, they are there, they will vote, but they won't win. 0 seats. So, there used to be 5 seats from the state, now there are 4, but they are all guaranteed to be red. And the thing is, this isn't just some theory. These are real news stories from Texas and Florida. Now let me explain how this works in reality. After the census, Texas got additional seats in the House, in Congress. The Republicans who control the state legislature redrew the electoral map so that the number of red districts increased from 22 to 25. And that's, mind you, 3 additional seats in Congress. In the suburbs of Dallas and Houston, the district boundaries were drawn in such zigzags to cut off liberal neighborhoods from the rapidly growing ethnic communities. Here's another example. In April 2026, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' updated map came into effect. Instead, the 5th electoral district, which historically allowed minorities to elect their own candidate, was eliminated. And expert analysis shows that this change gives the Republican Party an extra 4 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives without any change in the voters' preferences. So, once again, nothing really changes in the minds of Americans. The maps are changed. Through manipulation and technicalities, suddenly there are 4 more seats in Congress. So, there's no need to convince anyone to vote differently. There's no need to run any kind of campaign or anything like that. No. Just like that. The Republicans automatically get 4 more seats in Congress even if the current electoral dynamics stay the same. How will this actually help the Republicans in the elections? Here, the geographic factor plays a key role. Democratic supporters live densely in cities. This makes it easier to pack them into districts, but Trump supporters live more spread out, which makes it easier to capture rural districts. In addition, in 28 out of 50 states, both chambers of the legislature are controlled by Republicans, and these are the very people who conduct the census. These are the very people who draw the electoral maps. In addition, Donald Trump appointed 234 federal judges during his term. This network of courts now rejects lawsuits from the Democrats, classifying this redistricting as legitimate political competition. And now the main paradox. According to current estimates, the Republicans could gain control of the House of Representatives even with nationwide support that's 4% lower than that of the Democrats. Once again, they could actually get fewer votes in the election overall, but still they would end up with more seats in the House of Representatives. This creates a situation where the legislative agenda will be completely controlled by supporters of Donald Trump. The funding of federal programs will be revised in favor of these red states. And what's the problem? Changing this system legally is almost impossible until the next census in 2030. They'll get through the next presidential election here just fine. And the whole problem for the Democrats is that gerrymandering is not against the law. It's just using, or as they say, abusing the system. It's basically using the laws to your own advantage. Mathematical models and control over local legislatures allow the Republican Party to neutralize demographic changes in the country, because the urban population, which usually votes for the Democrats, is definitely growing. And the proportion of minorities is changing, who, by the way, also usually vote for the Democrats. Thus, the outcome of the November elections was largely determined back in April, at the moment when these new district maps were signed. So I hope we've cleared things up a bit, and there will definitely be more news on this topic. And when you see it, you'll already understand what it's all about. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, give this episode a like. And friends, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would be grateful to you for that. You can do this with any donation or a paid channel membership using the links and details in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.